Welcome to the Fat Dad Fishing Show podcast. My name is Rich, and I'm the host of this show. Tonight, I'm joined by my regular two co-hosts, Ed, who is the owner of Captain Hank's Tackle, and John, who is the owner of Creeley Custom Rods. We are also joined tonight by a member of the Captain Hank's Pro staff and the Fat Dad Fishing team, Mike Warriner. And we are going to be sitting down and talking about the preparations that we're going through and the considerations that we have to keep in our minds for the opening of spring Blackfish, also known as Tautog or Tog. And we're going to be talking specifically about New Jersey waters, which is where we spend most of our times. However, this is applicable all up and down the coast wherever you can target Tog. So for those that are interested in Tog, this is an episode for you. But before we dive in, just wanted to go through real quick. If you would take a moment just to give a follow or a subscribe to this podcast, that would be really helpful to us. And of course, if you're finding value and you want to share it to friends, that's awesome as well. The other thing is, if you could give us a review, a positive review on Apple or Spotify or any of the platforms that allow it, would be awesome. It helps us to grow the podcast and it helps us to draw bigger guests as we go forward so we can continue to provide great value to all of you. So with that, kick back, we're going to jump right in. Let's jump right in and let's start talking a little bit about Blackfish and the season opener, April 1st in New Jersey. I'm not sure what the days are up the coast in New York, down the coast. I think Delaware, isn't Delaware open?
I'm not sure that Delaware ever actually closes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
All year you can go catch fish in Delaware.
Yeah.
That's why that trip, that outer wall trip I've always talked about is always intriguing. Midsummer, you can still go, June, July, May, doesn't matter. Still go catch them.
That's going to be crazy. And we're going to have to convince John to go with us on that. And that would be a great place. Now, so the outer wall is a little bit of a pedal/paddle offshore.
I think it's what Ryan had talked about. He does the inner wall. He's from down there in Delaware. He does
2 miles, I think.
Oh, just shy of 2 miles, I think. I think it's 1.8 miles before you go out from Louis. If you ever take the Cape May ferry, you go right past it.
Right.
Cruises you right past that wall.
And that's got to hold some really nice tog out there. Definitely some really nice flounder areas out in that area as well. The concern that I would have is it is cold 2 miles off. I wouldn't want to go with you, Mike, to be honest, unless you had a dry suit right now, but I'm down for the summer. And we got to convince John to go out open water.
I'm open for open water. It's just
there's a rock wall right there the whole time. You're okay.
Yeah.
The other boats and stuff around.
We'll climb on. We'll be all right. You pick and choose your day. That's the biggest thing. You got to time it with the tide. You got to time with the wind. You can't just go on a whim and go pull something like that. Everything's got to be right. The stars have to align, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Especially because it's at the bay, right? And the bay has its own water patterns.
That's a massive opening there. Those walls were built. I think that's what they actually call harbor of refuge. And those walls were actually built to, kind of break some of the turbulence and the waves where boats could escape and come inside there and kind of, seek refuge, so to speak. You know what I mean? So
well, it looks like great cover. So we're going to have to try that. So let's kind of talk about that. So we already have a question in there. What's the preferred bait of choice for the spring? So let's start off with the baits. And let's kind of go around the horn. Mike, do you want to start us off?
Same thing. The only thing, I'm a short crab guy, but one thing I notice about the spring and early is sometimes they want clam. I don't know why. They want that softer bait. It's the only time I've ever found that you get a really good, solid clam bite on Tog. This is, I'm talking inshore, like in the inlets and stuff like that. So like early season, that's the only thing I noticed. But besides that, no matter what I'm doing, if it's Tog or sheep's head, if I'm catching crabs, I want short crabs. That's my thing.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love the idea of clam. But the one thing you will get at this time of the year when you're dropping for Tog and you have clam on there is you will get a pretty good share of striped bass as bycatch. while you're fishing them, which is not necessarily a bad thing unless you're not using circle hooks, and then you can't keep them. But I like the idea of clam. Ed, what are you going to think about dropping down first on your first trip out?
I'm with Mike. Shore crabs, shores, greens. I want to give fiddlers another shot. Now that I'm a little bit more of a seasoned tog fisherman, I think I want to give them another look. But the standard.
Okay, so so the clam. You did say clam, right?
I've never.
Oh,
used
you
clam,
have.
no.
Okay, John, you've used clam, I assume.
Right. So yeah, this is this time of year. It goes into a theory that I talked to a captain about anyway. They're teething still. So anything hard right now, they don't really want to chew. They're going to spit out right away. So you have a tendency to see clam get bit more, and the shrimp again. Back to the frozen shrimp again. I'm hands down a firm believer. Go get that cooked frozen shrimp and use that in the spring. I mean, again, use your crabs and everything, but you choose it wisely. Some days are going to be better than others with certain baits. I'd say have every option open. That's what it's going to be. I'm not going to use the fiddlers this time of year. I feel like that's more of a seasonal type thing. When you get towards the summertime, that might be a better bait because that's what you're seeing more around. And the same thing with the sand fleas. I'm going to use them more in the summer when we hit back in August when it opens up.
Yeah, I don't even know. Catching fiddlers right now might be really tough.
And that's why I say it might be better, to wait until you hit that August season when we get back into that area when you're going to see those type of baits in the areas.
Yeah, or you could get imported ones.
Yeah.
If you're not catching them yourself. So, yeah, as Heaven and Ella is saying, clam and sandworms. I've used sandworms in the past, but not for tog, but I have caught tog on them. I've used them when I was bait fishing back in the day for striped bass, and I would always fish rocks, really, really heavy cover there, which is great for the striped bass, but it's also, as you know, the place that you want to look for tog. But clam, definitely. I'm definitely going to put clam in the mix. Jack is mentioning bloodworms. And again, you're going to get a huge crossover bycatch with striped bass with that. So just be really careful and keep in mind the regulations when it comes to striped bass and the circle hooks that you need to use. You're not going to be able to keep them if you're not using a circle hook for tog. You're going to have to throw those striped bass back. But hey, if you don't want to keep them, no big deal, I guess. Just be real careful that you don't gut hook anything. Although, you know what? Let's be honest. If you're fishing for tog, you have the bait on there. You're not gut hooking a striped bass because you're going to be setting that hook the second that you feel anything on there. It's not the same as when you're striped bass fishing. You just stick it in a rod holder, which I think is where most of the gut hooks come from. It's very rare that something's going to be gut hooked when you're holding the rod in your hand. Just my thought, and you're doing a quick set, which is what you're going to end up doing. So once a striped bass hits that, it's going to take it just like a tog, and you're going to slam that thing home. So
to touch on that real quick, though, I don't see why you couldn't keep a bass that you caught on a tog jig. I would probably maybe have a rod rigged with a circle hook on board just because, but I mean, we catch bass on regular bucktails and stuff like that. They're not circle hooks.
It's the live bait issue.
You can't target. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to use a tog jig to catch a striper." But if it's bycatch, I don't know. Is that a?
Yeah, you can't keep it. You can't keep it if it's hooked on a non-approved method, which would be a non-circle hook. If you have any type of natural bait on a J hook or anything that's not a circle hook, even if it's an offset circle, you still can't keep it because that's not legal. It has to be an inline circle. So
right, no octopus circle hooks.
Exactly,
not allowed. Right.
Yeah, so you gotta. If you do catch it, you are compelled to throw it back just because it's an illegal take at that point.
Okay, so then bring a rod with a circle hook on it.
Yeah. I guess so. Or just use artificials. You could use the gulp crabs, which you can catch tog on. I wouldn't do it to start off the season, but I guess you could do it. The shedder mold. Mm-hmm. Then you could use it on a regular tog jig and keep whatever you know.
Have you tried it?
Natural.
The gulp crabs?
Yeah, I believe I've caught them on that. Yeah.
I never tried it.
Yeah, I don't remember God, I remember last year when we had a discussion about this. I've caught them on gulp. I don't remember offhand if I caught them on the gulp crabs. Gulp shrimp, probably is what it was. But, they will eat gulp. They're definitely drawn to it.
I'll tell you what else will bite gulp is triggerfish. You can take just a piece of chunk, take your scissors and cut a chunk of gulp off, and they'll bite that. Especially offshore. Flounder fishing. If you're ever flounder fishing somewhere, especially offshore, and you drop down, you feel a lot of taps, and you pull your gulp up, and you see all these little like half moon shaped bites, perfect half moon chunks taken out. That's triggerfish. I've had it in the bay where you go across a sod bank, and all of a sudden you feel tap, 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 tap. You pull it up, and you see all those perfect chunks. Looks like something with a beak took a chunk out. That's triggerfish doing that.
Yeah, I think it's just size down on the hook and slam it home when you feel it.
Yeah, snag them in the face, one or the other,
Yeah, they got those tiny
first.
Mouth. Yeah, they got the real small mouth, which would be difficult.
Yeah, they're tough to hook on anything smaller than a number one hook or something,
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're blow fishing, you're going to have to, which have a similar bite, I would say, a bite pattern, because they do have those little beak mouths.
Yeah, they'll do the same thing.
Yep, you got to slam home the small hooks in their faces. Mm-hmm. And Heaven L is mentioning, is that triggerfish or blowfish? So I guess a similar bite pattern there. I'm not sure.
If it's bigger, it's a triggerfish.
Okay, so you're looking
bigger
for the
chunk.
Gotcha.
Right.
All right, so we're all going to be looking something softer, clams to start. I think honestly, something like an Asian crab would work fine as well. Something that you can get naturally in the area, I think, is always a good bet. Now, if you're going offshore, John, what's your thought? White leggers versus greens, does it even matter?
I don't think it matters at this point of the year. You're going to be fishing more inshore again, so it doesn't matter to me. I mean, 90% of the time, guys are using greens over whites anyway at this time of year. So, again, day by day though. So we'll find out April 1st.
Yeah, I guess that's the real thing. What are they going to eat? So you're heading out opening day, John. You're going offshore, correct?
It all depends. Again, our water temperatures seem a little higher than usual. I know once we hit that 50-degree mark, people are going to start looking inshore more than going a little bit deeper. I know when we were out there in the backwaters, we were seeing 50, 51. So, I mean, at the pilings, I'm sure we could have caught some already.
Yeah, that was, let's be honest, that was a discussion.
Yeah.
When we were coming in with there were clams all over. And John said, I bet you. Now, John had already packed up, so he wasn't going to do it. He's like, I bet you grab one of those clams and you go right over there and you're going to pull up a tog. And as tempting as it was, being a couple of weeks out of season, it was like, we'll just let it go for now. But the water temperatures, I was feeling positive about it. Now, the warmest temperatures up around 50 were at the very end of the outgoing, and we were in an area with some very large flats. So you're talking 3-4 feet of water. It gets pretty warm, and it was bright sun when it could get through the fog. So it was indicating to me that we're going to get a quicker warm up. And and it hasn't even gotten cold since then. So, and that was last Friday, and it looks like we're going to be pretty good. The coldest nights are getting down to 40. Well, that's not going to do much to the water temperatures to hurt it when you're up in the 60s, 70s during the day. So, all right. So we're all going to look clam. We're going to look at some of the more localized hard baits, like the crabs. Let's talk a little bit about the gear that you're going to use, and are you going to be using the same stuff that you are? Now, let's start offshore. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll move to the inshore stuff. So, John, your typical offshore setup is what?
Okay, so for me, I run a Rye Geek 733 acid wrap rod with a Alliant 300 by Accurate, 50-pound test, up to 60. The leader is going to be 50 to 60 with a Belmar rig is primarily my choice. For spinning gear, this year I'm going to be trying out the Century Weapon Junior, which is rated 1/4 to 1.5. No, I can throw a 2-ounce on there. That's 7 foot as well. Putting the Iowa BG 3000 on it with 30-pound lead test and 30-pound leader, using the Captain Hanks jawbreaker jigs. So we'll see how that goes. Guys will use the Century Pro Togger. I see a lot of guys use the Lama Glass, and some guys will still break out the old Muskie St. Croix rods. But you're looking at like your Torium 12s, your Torium 16s by Shimano, Daiwa Saltiga 12s and 16s. Those are primarily going to be your reels. Any 3,000 and 4,000 reel as far as a Stratic, a Daiwa BG. Some guys are using the Bandstall 50s and 75s. That's primarily where you want to stick in that offshore range.
All right. So I'm trying to process all that. And what you're basically saying is you're using, unless I missed something, you're using the same thing that you're using in the winter.
Yeah, hands down. Because at this time of year, this is when the big fish come to play. This small gap is where you're going to see double digit after double digit after double digit.
All right. So you're still using the telephone poles and the tree trunk. I can't say that because I'm using the same rod now. So
now you use a 32. You use a 32, so it's a little more geared down.
I thought that's what you said you were using.
No, I use the 33, which is even more of a baseball bat. So
okay. All right. So I'm using the 32. And I think that, what are you, so that's offshore. What are you using inshore?
I'll still use the spinning gear. Will still be the same way.
Right.
As far as a conventional setup, I primarily use a bait caster more inshore. So I'll use a Daiwa Alexa 300, which is overkill, but I prefer Daiwas, and those are pretty much the only bait casters they have on the market right now for what I'm looking for. And I'll use the 732, which is what you got. Not saying that can't handle a double-digit tog, but it has a little more sensitivity where I can use that inshore and not, be afraid to use it.
Right. Mike, what are you going to be using? And you're doing all inshore, correct?
Yeah. I fish the same things pretty much if it's any bottom fishing like that. 6'3" to 7 foot. I like the Travalas. I like them a lot. 6'3" light action, 10-pound test, 15-pound leader, up to the 7 foot, 15-pound braid, 20-pound all fluorocarbon leaders, and switch it up either, some jigging or just a regular dropper loop. Switch. Sometimes they don't want the jig. Sometimes they'll take the dropper loop. Just keep changing it up. I prefer all spinning tackle for jigging. I don't, nothing more than 1 ounce for me for a jig. And it's just, it's almost like a finesse technique. So, it's a true light tackle technique. So I always just go to the spinning and real light rods. You know what I mean? That's, you talk about handling a double digit fish, like a double digit tog, but like those, that biggest sheep that I took last year was 14 pounds. And that was on a 7 foot medium light, 15-pound braid, 20-pound test. And, that's a 14-pound sheep head. So you can handle it. It's just, right. Is it going to break you off if it wraps up in something? Yeah, absolutely. But, just it's about presenting it to it. The water's moving a little bit. All that real light stuff makes a difference, especially the light line. It makes a huge difference on keeping it vertical.
Yeah. I think it's important to point out a big distinction inshore versus offshore. Generally speaking, I know there's exceptions, but you're not talking the heavy wrecks, with the sharp edges all over it when you're inshore in most places. Now, there are a couple places we fish that there are, but in most places you're talking about a bed of submerged rocks that have, they're coming up maybe a foot. So they don't have these big crevices to dive back into. They're just kind of patrolling around rocks, unless you're right up against a jetty. But then again, well, as a kayak guy, then you just move your kayak. You move your kayak any direction you want. You have a better chance of getting it out of there. So I think it is a good time to think about scaling down, getting more sensitivity, getting more feeling. And as you said, you can catch some really big fish on some of these lighter rods. Ed, you're using a lighter rod, right?
Yeah, I'm, I do have a Creeley custom telephone pole. So that'll be my offshore setup.
Yep.
And then, but like inshore, I have Jigging World rods. So I have the Nexus. I have the spinning and the bait casting version. So I'll be primarily using those, and I'm from the same school of thought of Mike. I try to use the lightest line I can. So my one's got 20-pound braid on it, the other one's got 15. So light line, light leader. With the lighter line and leader, you can cut the water better. So you don't need a giant 12-ounce weight to get to the bottom quick. 1 ounce will do it on a heavy day. So I try to keep it as light as possible.
I tend to do that as well. To James's comment, how about a Creeley Custom Pro Rod? So I fish with with John's rods. I also have a couple others that I fish with, and I do tend to go lighter when I'm inshore, but I'm not quite as light as Ed is when I'm using the bait casters, and it's because I use them for inshore and offshore. So I'm typically going, if you see any video of me with a bait caster, it is almost guaranteed, if it has blue line on it, that's 30 pound. It's going to be a 30-pound braid. That way I can use it offshore. John makes fun of me because I go offshore with 30-pound test braid. And then I'll use a 30-pound leader on that, which, sometimes a 40-pound leader. But then inshore, I'll use that also for fluke. And I find that it still cuts pretty well. In the deeper stuff, I may actually switch over to a spinning rod, which I never have more than 15-pound braid on. And then I'll be using mainly, if you see spinning rod, especially with the blue line, it's all 15-pound braid. If it's green line, it's 10-pound braid. And that's typically what I'm using in the back. But again, if I'm jigging with a conventional or with a bait caster, which is actually the rods that I use the most, again, John's rods, they're Creeley custom rods. Those are going to have 30-pound braid on them, so I can get the best of both worlds. And, I've had people tell me, well, it'll break you off. After we did the Tautog last year, people, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't pull in something that's over 5 pounds with that. Well, okay, I have a 9-pounder. Go check the video on 30-pound braid with a 20-pound leader offshore on a wreck. So you can. Yes, I might lose some fish. I get it. I understand. But I also don't want to be fishing 40, 50-pound braid in the back. Now, unlike John has a rod. He's a rod builder. He has a rod for every single species, every single location, and the reel to go with it. So he's a little bit more specialized with his approach. I'm more of a generalist, so I need something that goes inshore, offshore, multi-species. And I think that's how Ed and Mike are as well. But again, we're not rod builders.
Yeah, I'm excited to get John's rod offshore to see what this thing can do. I put my Avid on there, so I'm really pumped to get that thing going.
I'll tell you what. You had correct me if I'm wrong, John. It's identical to mine in the components, correct?
It's the same exact. It basically layout pretty much.
You're going to love it. I absolutely love that thing.
Yeah, I can't wait.
You're going to be you're going to be very happy with it. Takes a little getting used to it when you come off of real light stuff, because it's not light. It's got a heavy backbone, but it has the sensitivity of a light rod, which is interesting. So it takes a little bit of just getting the feel down, but once you do, you're going to see the advantages that you have out of it. And that actually goes to a question that we have. If you're fishing jigs, don't you have to be on the lighter side? And I would say you don't necessarily. There's two things. There's a lighter rod, but then there's a more sensitive tip. Those are different. There's different things. How heavy is the rod and the backbone versus how sensitive the tip is. John, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think this is a good thing. Actually, James, go back to, if you have time, go back and watch a video with Chris Balaban when we talked rods and reels. A lot of it comes down to, your action of your rod. When I think of tog fishing, I want moderate fast. That's just me personally. But if you go from company to company, you jump from St. Croix over to Lamiglass over to Jalumas, moderate fast could be 3 different ways in each rod. So would I say lighter using jigs? Yes and no. It definitely depends on your lure rating. That's what you want to look at more than anything. I like a window of 1/2 to 2 ounce, if possible, when it comes to trying to jig.
But you want a sensitive tip, though.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Again, I think that comes down to, the materials in the rod as well. What is that rod made out of? Because if I go buy an ugly stick, that's rated 1/2 to 2 ounce, and then go buy a Jigging World Nexus that's rated 1/2 to 2 ounce, it's a completely different rod.
Yeah, I'm looking around for the Shimano Corrado I have, which is rated properly, but it does not have a sensitive tip. So if you're going to go out and look for it, here's one thing that I have learned, and I will tell everybody. You want something where you're going to feel any movement on the end of that jig when you're going for tog. You want to know the second that thing is touched. And if you have something that is too stiff in the tip, it's just going to make it that much harder. And, John, you were there when I was using that rod that one time, and it was tough. And I know I was missing hits. I was feeling it after it was dropped. I wasn't feeling it when it was picked up. But the thing is, it has a really strong backbone, but the backbone is not stronger than the rod that you made for me.
Yeah.
So the rod that you made is actually heavier, but it has a much more sensitive tip. And I think that's the thing. And to your point, pick it up, try it out, flex the tip a little and just make sure that you have some sensitivity there. If it's too stiff, you're just going to find yourself at a disadvantage when you're out there.
The one thing I could say is composite. That seems to be the way to go, because you have a fiberglass transitioning into a carbon fiber graphite tip. Composite seems the best way to go, because you have that strong backbone with a nice slender tip that's sensitive. So that would be the route I would go, and it's affordable too.
Yeah. Mike, what are you thinking about the sensitivity of the rods?
It's important to have a rod that's got a good tip that you can feel it, or not necessarily feel it, but almost see it. It's more of like a visual thing too. You know what I mean? And then a rod that can handle that kind of like backbone. I think like he's saying, people get confused, I think, when they hear action versus like the actual power of the rod and the act, the weight of the rod, meaning like lure weight versus the action. A moderate rod is my understanding that it can kind of handle, you can bend it more like a slow pitch rod. They're moderate action. You can bend them in half, but they don't have that tip that like a fast action or a fast action would have.
Yeah.
Like my understanding is kind of like from a freshwater principle, where like rods that have a faster, extra fast tip are better for something that's got like a single hook or or on the surface, like a walking bait or a frog or a plug or something like that. You want, more of a fast tip, and then just like a stiff rod. It doesn't bend throughout the whole rod. You know what I mean? For Tog, I feel like it's kind of, you want that cross in the middle of something that real sensitive tip, but then when you have to, you can put a lot of pressure on it and not worry about breaking it. Same goes for any kind of around that heavy structure. Sometimes you just got to bulldog them out of there,
Yes, I think we've all been there. And talking about the action of the rod, the best way to think about it is, you have different things. You have extra fast, moderate, slow, moderate, fast. You have all of these things, right? And it really comes down to how much bend needs to go into the rod before you start to get the power of the rod behind the bend, right? So it doesn't take much weight to bend a slow rod, a slow pitch rod, nearly in half. But once you start to get around half, then the power and the backbone of that rod comes in. So to set the hook with power on a slow rod, you have to set it far enough that you get that whole half of that rod bent. Mm-hmm. So once it gets there, now it's driving the power through the tip of that hook and into the mouth. Right. When you have an extra fast hook, it's very fast. It's a very fast set. So that's where you can, just a twitch and you've now set the hook.
Single hook to up water, right?
Yeah. Now that's where it comes in. Now there's preference involved in that. Some people will absolutely swear by extra fast and fast for top waters. I personally like moderate because I have a habit, and this is just me, somebody else could be the exact opposite. I have a habit of pulling it too soon and missing the hook set.
Right.
So the second I feel it, I'm twitching it rather than waiting for the weight to settle onto that top water. So the moderate is more forgiving. So it gives me that split second extra where I'm trying to set the hook to, make up for my, my impatience when I'm on top water. But generally speaking, you will find in many cases, some of the really best people at top water are going to be using something at the extra fast,
right.
The extra fast range with the single hooks.
Well, it's like hollow body frogs. You need a stiffer rod to set that, to set that hook inside of them, where the majority of crankbait rods where you're using treble hooks, they're moderate action because you're not really yanking that hook set as much as you're kind of sweeping into it when you feel it. You know what I mean? It's just a whole different. That's why, again, a good backbone is important for a good hook set on something like a Tog or a sheep's head that's got a real hard mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, you did say something interesting. You said something that Kwa had said in the last one when talking about sheep's head. You actually watch the line. It's a visual thing for you as much as it is the feel.
Oh, the same thing for Tog too. Same thing for Tog. A lot of times, like, I'm not everybody, sometimes I feel like when I say this stuff, because that's where I got it from, sometimes I feel like I'm quoting like Skinner when you talk about not swinging on those little tap, 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 and you're almost watching the line and like you're maintaining contact with that jig constantly. And a lot of times you lose contact and you see this slack in your line. Set that hook, because that's a bigger fish that picked that bait up and he's moving up towards you with it. You know what I mean? And then same time, it goes for everything like that. Sometimes you don't like a sheep, you don't necessarily, I don't know how to put it. You don't necessarily feel it as much as you see almost, it can even be a left to right movement of the line of it, kind of, the line going like this, you're shifting, you're not feeling that tap, but you see that movement. That's a fish actually picking it up. You're not getting that slack because he's not coming up, but he's actually moving away with it. So that's why you're losing that. I don't know. It's a feeling.
Well, it's,
sight. It's not a.
It's funny that you say
teacher.
Yeah, I mean that's what Qua was talking about last week. He's like, you have to watch it, and he was giving the example of when he had somebody on the boat and the guy dropped the crab down. He's like, reel it up. You just missed it. And he's like, no, I didn't. He reels it up and there's no more bait. He's like, put another one on, drop it down. And he's like, you missed it because he wasn't watching. Now, I will say this. I have never thought about watching the line for Tog. Ed, have you done that? So you watch it as well?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I'm waiting for the taps, but then I'm also watching to see what the line's doing. My biggest fish to date is 6 pounds. So when I caught that fish, that's what happened. There was no tap. I just saw the line because obviously the boat's anchored. I saw the line start to move, and I'm like, wait a second, something's not right. So I started to reel up on it a little bit, and then I felt the pressure, and I set the hook. A battle after that, but yeah, it was watching the line.
All right, John, you watched the line, right?
Not really.
Okay. I was joking because you're always talking to the guy next to you. You're always looking at the guy next to you.
Hey, pretty much. You know what? I really rarely watch a line. I probably should, but I could tell when that thing goes slack. And when it goes slack, that's when I just know. I don't swing on everything. I can decipher, it's a small fish. I'm not swinging on it. It's another small fish. I wait for the big one to come in, wait for that line to go slack, and then just aim for the sky.
Listen, John, hook sets are free, my friend.
I'm not swinging on everything.
So let's talk about the hook set, and I want to ask right now for Qua and Andrew, if he's still in the chat, if you guys are swinging on the first for Tog, not for sheep's head, if you're swinging on the first movement or the first touch. I can tell you, I do. I swing the second I feel something, and I tend to catch a lot. So I can't say that I couldn't catch more if I didn't, or bigger if I didn't, but I can just say I'm not missing a ton of fish, but I swing a lot. And John, you definitely wait. Yeah,
for sure. I don't want to be sitting there wasting my time on small fish. So I just wait for the bigger fish to come in. Plus, if I'm swinging on everything, that means I'm going to be hooking up more on those smaller fish. Well, it goes back to what people say is if you let those small fish eat that bait, sit there and peck at it, well, that big fish is going to come in and just move those smaller fish right out of the way and go to town on it.
Mike, are you swinging every time?
No. Okay. No, it's like I just looked down and I just saw somebody, Andrew Sokol said, I swing when I feel the jig moving, the same thing. Not on that little tap, 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 tap. For Tog, you're just if it's sheep and you're only 10 15 feet down and you feel a tap, you should probably try and swing on it because you might miss it. But for Tog, if it's sitting dead on the bottom and you're dead sticking it on the bottom, no, I'm not waiting for that tap. That's little fish. It's a bunch of little fish will come over and check it out and create that and draw that attention of a bigger fish that's going to pick it up. And he wants it, and he's going to try to move it away from the competition, and to eat it. And that's what I'm waiting for. That's why I say it's more of a sight thing for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. And I guess to your point, I mean, I'm not swinging when I think they're like picking at the legs. You know what I mean? But I am swinging the second. Maybe it's closer to what Andrew is saying when the jig moves. if it's going to lift the jig at all and move the actual jig itself, I'm swinging. Yeah. I don't care if it moves it an inch. If I just feel it, pick up and move, I'm setting it then. Right. I'm not doing the let's sit back and wait for a while. But I have seen John do that. John will be extremely patient on that. I am not that guy. I'm definitely setting
I'm the same
it
way though. Look, hook sets are free, like Ed said, but so are shore crabs. So, I'll feed them all day. They can eat, grow them.
That's a good point. And Ed, you're saying the hook sets are free. You're swinging away.
I'm a quantity, not quality kind of guy. I'd rather go out and catch 100 little fish than one monster. I mean, I go out to have fun. So, bending the rod is fun for me. So I don't care if they're 12-inch fish or not keepers. I mean, that's just me.
I hear you. I mean, it's a fun day on the water either way, right? Yeah. It's more fun for you when you've got the sore arm, which I guess, Mike, if you go back to striped bass earlier this week with him, he was going for the numbers. You were looking for the size.
Yeah, that's my excuse. Sure.
Yeah. So we've got our different opinions on that, which I think is great. And I think every one of us catch plenty of tog. I think all of us has caught some really nice sized tog inshore and offshore when we've gone offshore. So I guess it all works. It's more of a preference thing, but I think the important thing, and the chat is kind of validating this, wait till it actually moves rather than taps, right? So let it go a little bit further than the taps and wait for a pronounced movement, whether it's lifting, so you get some slack in there, or if it moves off to the side, that's when it's picked it up. And that's where you should cross its eyes with a nice hook set. And I shouldn't say that. Are you guys crossing its eyes? Or are you really swinging hard at it? Or are you just doing the old lift and reel?
I'm swinging hard because tog, you want to get them out of the rocks. You don't want to give them any opportunity they have to get you caught up in structure.
I'm lifting to make sure I still feel that weight. And I'm trying to, think of trying to figure out how to put it. I'm lifting until to make sure I still feel that weight, and then I give it to him.
Yeah, I'm setting it hard. But yes, yeah. I will move it a little bit. I find it difficult to go between fluke and tog, to be honest with you, because it's a totally different approach for me. But I'm going to be trying to set it hard. And the funny thing is I'll set it hard because, you have to get through that really hard mouth. Ed's jigs, you don't really get them through the mouth as often as you get them through the lip, which is awesome because these fish have such gummy lips. Once you get it through the lip, it's not getting off, and it's not tearing either. The biggest one that I ever caught was through the lip. It wasn't through the mouth. It's not like I had to get it out of that hard spot in there. And it was not easy to get unhooked. So that's the one good thing for me when you have a tog is whether you get it in the lip or the mouth, it's going to stay there.
Hey, and I'll tell you, the other nice thing about that hook is it's a heavy hook, but it's not the heaviest hook in the world. So you got to remember that the smaller the gauge the hook, the lighter the hook, the easier it is to penetrate. Like a light wire hook is going to pierce skin easier than a heavy hook. So it's that trying to find that kind of, in between fit. And I have not straightened one. I have not straightened one. And that was all on that. What is that hook? I don't know what it is. It's that funny shaped thing.
Yeah, they're the super secret hooks.
Yeah. It's that funny shaped thing. And it's not the thickest hook. It seems it's sharp. It's not, like I said, it's not the heaviest gauge wire, but it's, you get a nice penetration. And I haven't straightened it up. I have not. I haven't straightened. The only time I've straightened them up is when I'm snagged in something and I've just pulled it straight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, same with me. The only time I've ever bent one of those hooks is when I was stuck on something and
right. Not
pulling
from
on
fish,
30.
straighten it. No, absolutely not.
But it never went totally out of whack and totally went straight.
Right. I think my light rods would break before I'd straighten one of those to begin with. John might know. I've never tried.
John likes to load up the rods on heavy stuff, so
it's fun.
It makes me nervous. It makes me nervous when John is snagged. I'm like, Jesus, he's going to move the whole freaking party boat.
Yeah, I've bent the hell out of those Travalas, man, and they will lay over for you, man. It's nice.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk real quick. A little bit about the reels and the drag, maximum drag that you want, how you're setting the drag for them. Let's start off. Ed, you want to talk about what you're using for the reels specifically, and specifically the drag and what weight you're looking for?
As far as reels go, I mean, I have my Avid. It's the newer SXJ 5.3, so it has the Raptor drag. I'm really enjoying that one. I mean, I got an Accurist. I don't think it's going to be very good for Tog. It's just I don't think it has enough power. It's like 14-pound max, so that's going to be
18.
relegated to Fluke. And then I have my battles, my Penn battles. If I'm using a bigger, if I'm using a spinning setup for Tog, I'm using a bigger rod. So I'm going to be using like a 4,000, 5,000 size battle. Pretty much what I'm running is either the Avid or the battles.
Now, one other question: what type of retrieval are you looking at? Did you say it was a 5.3?
Yeah, the
7?
Avid's it's the SXJ 5.3.
Okay. So that's going to be more of the slower reach. Well, that's actually still a pretty decent retrieve. Mike, what are you using on yours as far as drag and the retrieve ratio?
I think they're like 5, 6. I've gone through so many reels. I've got a shoebox with 2 freaking broken. I love the Travalas. I always talk about the Shimano Travalas. I love those rods, but the Shimano Stratic, I freaking hate the things. I've been burned by Shimano in their reels enough. I'm done with them. I've never tried the Daiwas. I know a lot of people like them, but man, I went back to it's Penn Spin Fishers, 25s and 3500s on all of them, man. I just went back to it. I can't, I grew up with them. I always had them, and it's just tried the different things. They break, and the Spin Fishers, I go back to them. I love them. I like them. Just, yeah, they're not the smoothest feeling drag in the world, but they work for me. You know what I mean? They go.
Yeah, and they're pulling this, but your technique when you hook is you lift and hold high, right? So it's not you're using the hook set, right? You're using the hook set, and then you're holding it up real high to keep them out of the rocks. You're not necessarily relying on the reel.
No, I'm relying on the rod.
Okay,
I'm more relying on the rod. I mean, I'm not putting a lot of, you can get spinning reels now that with like the Penn Slammers, they've got up to like 33-pound drags or something like that.
Right.
There's not many rods that can handle 33 pounds of drag, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So, I mean, as far as setting my drag, it's light, but it's not, I'm fishing light line, 10, 15 pound. It's hard for me to put it together. I've never been, when you ask me.
Well, I think that's how most people fish though.
Mike's also good too for when he sets the hook. He'll like start to lift the rod, and then he'll stand up in the kayak in the waves. So like he'll add the rod and then his 6-foot, frame into the whole.
That's
thing.
why I get away with those 6'3" rods in the kayak. When you got like 76, 77 inches of reach, it makes it easy.
Yeah, I watch you when we go out, and it's funny. I mean, it is funny to watch you. I don't even know if you realize what you're doing, but I don't.
That's why when you ask me questions, I have to really think about it.
You are like so focused, and that's why I said I noticed you hold the rod up. But to Ed's point, if you're not already standing, you jump up and you're standing. And for those that understand the fat dad thing, we don't jump up in kayaks and stand. Mike is jumping up in a kayak and standing in an inlet. And he's leaning. Yeah, he's leaning. He's moving the trolling motor with his foot while he's, balanced on one foot with a fish, up off the bottom. So it's, but yes. Okay. So you're using the rod to clear the rocks. John, you're using, I believe, the rod somewhat. You bring it up to about halfway, but then you crank hard and use the gear ratio to pull it out.
So, yeah. Well, we talking conventional or spinning, that goes back to a big factor too. If I'm using my conventional setup, as I'm lifting that rod or tog out of the rocks, I am cranking as I get it out.
Yeah.
Once I know I have that rod at that 12 o'clock mark, which is not what you want to do, but tog fishing is a different ball game. That's why these rods are built the way they are. Once I make it to that point, that's when I'll bring that rod back down because I know I got it out. I got that 10 feet, of movement, because that's why they tell you 7 foot. As you have that 7 foot, as you're lifting up, you want to be reeling as you lift. That gives you that 10-foot mark as you go. That's the whole scope of tog fishing, is to get it out as quick as possible. So when it comes to the conventional setup, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Spinning gear, no, I'm cranking as fast as I can, and that's why I change over to that BQ or the BGMQ this year, because they are 26 pounds of drag. Like Mike said, it's a little overkill, but for a size 3000 reel, 26 pounds of drag, and the gear ratio, I think it's like 5.2 on it. So I mean, that thing's going to get it out quickly too. So, and it's 38 inches of line per crank. So
that's significant.
Yeah.
I'm the one I'm going to get 5 cranks on it, and then I know it's going to be 5 feet. That's pulled in there. Plus, when I bring the rod back down, so I mean it's going to be pulling in almost 3 feet per crank. So even if it starts pulling anything back out, I know it's still going to be clear. But the drags that I'm looking at is 18 plus if I'm going offshore, and then if I'm inshore, I do like the Accurist inshore. The S3 has 18 pounds drag. I think that's fine for inshore. Now, I say that knowing that it is possible to catch a double digit inshore, but it's not likely. So I'm comfortable using the 18 pound drag on the Accurist. I wouldn't necessarily want to use that for the sheep's head if I'm fishing for both at the same time, but for tog, I'm comfortable with that. Sheep's head, you could get, well, I guess it's New Jersey. You're not likely, but you have a decent chance of getting double digit fish every time. So you got to be more careful with it. So that's what I'm looking at. I do like the Accurist inshore, but I also use for bait casters. So it's the Accurist S3. And then I also use a Penn Squall 300, I believe. And then the regular spinning reels I use, my good old cheap ones, the Penn Fierce 3, a Penn Pursuit 3, which is a $30 reel. That's been going now for 3.5 years. Caught 40 plus inch striped bass on it before. John thinks it's hilarious because I could buy 25 of my reels before, just to equal one of his reels, one of his $400 Accurate reels.
Yeah, I've blown too many pens.
I'll lose it, dude. I can't have nice things. You kidding me?
Yeah, he was talking to Randy on Friday about a setup. He's like, yeah, it's 500, and I was like, what, a new kayak? I'm like, come on, man. And he's like, that's just the reel, and I'm like, oh, it's such a different world that you live in, John. Just such a different world than me. Because I know, just like you said, Mike, I know I'd lose it. I would absolutely lose it. So that's why I don't even think about it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's great because John absolutely loves the reels.
I will. Somewhere's in Absecon Inlet, if anybody finds it, it's yours. There's a nice OTI pitch black with a 13 fishing Z3 on it. It's like a $200 rod and a almost $300 reel. It's there. You can have it. 30-pound braid, fresh. It's yours. I lost it.
Might not be too fresh now, but
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Used to be.
That's why you can have it.
It was when it went in. It was when it went in.
Yeah, it was. It was real fresh.
All right, so we got to at least talk about one more topic before we play this whole thing out. Are there any specific spots that you feel are different for spring tog fishing than they are for the fall tog fishing? Fall and winter, when we're talking inshore specifically, are you noticing anything different? Are you looking for a different area? And again, people in the chat be interested to see your thoughts as well. And I think I'm going to start this off. I'm really not looking for much different, but I will say that I'm going to be looking closer to the inlets at the beginning of the season if the water is still cold. But if it's warm, I'm literally, it's wide open, the same as when it starts to open back up in the fall. I'm just going all through the backwaters. Any thoughts on that, Ed?
I totally agree with that.
So you're looking at the water temperature too?
Yeah, I'm looking at water temps. I'm going to fish closer to the inlet, and for my immediate area where I can get to quickly and easily, it's going to be closer to an inlet. So that's naturally where I'm starting. So, and then as the season gets on and water's moving, I'll start looking further in the back. But I've had better luck towards the inlets.
Gotcha. Mike, what are you doing?
Deep water. If it's still cold, I'm looking for deeper water, closer to the inlets, but deep water. You can get summertime when it's warm, you can get bit almost anywhere along any jetty or any kind of bridge or anything like that. But that's just me. I could be totally wrong. It could be, no rhyme or reason to it, just my idea. But I look for deep water in the spring. That's where I start, as deep as I can find it.
So
inside. Okay,
so that's a good point. There are several inlets where you have rocks and structure, even bridges that are in 40 to 60 feet of water, just inside the inlet. You're looking at that, or are you just saying anything over? Okay, so really, literally the deepest spot that you can find.
Yeah.
All right. We have Peter mentioning that they're not in the same foraging areas as in the fall, so more heavy structure in the spring. Yeah. Which makes sense.
And the other thing I will say that I've noticed is outgoing tide seems to be better. When there's a lot of warmer water coming from in the bay and stuff on that outgoing tide, as it warms that water up from the shallower water pushing out that's been warmed up, that seems to make a difference.
Well, then you got bait moving too.
And you got and you got
all the crabs getting pushed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. John, what are you going to be looking at?
So as Peter said, you're looking for something that has more heavy structure. So this goes back to more of a biology type thing. They're getting ready to spawn. So they're looking for those spots to start laying dormant during that spawning season. After, they get done spawning, they're going to lay dormant for the most part. Still have that one here and there eaten, but that's why you're going to start looking for that structure and those bigger rock piles in deeper water. For me, this is why April 1st every year I try to get out on a boat. That determines how am I going to fish the jetties? How am I going to fish the inlets? How am I going to fish from the kayak now that this will be my first spring on the kayak? That's going to tell me where am I going, knowing the water temps. Are we going 10 miles off, or are we going a mile off the beach to go fishing for these, Tautog on April 1st? If we're going a mile off, that tells me, okay, great, I can go anywhere I want. If we're going a little bit deeper, if we're playing anywhere from 60 to 120 feet of water, that's going to tell me I might have to wait till the second weekend of April, and I'm going to have to look for those deeper holes. So that's my approach with this.
Gotcha. To Pete's point, one thing that I don't do in the spring is I don't fish the sod banks, and I haven't really thought about it in a lot of detail, but maybe that's because it just isn't as heavy a structure as you're going to get, those bridges and the inlet jetties, especially. A lot of these jetties, people don't realize within 5 feet of the jetty, you in some of them, you're dropping down to 50, 60 feet, even though you can stand right next to the jetty in a lot of cases, or it's, maybe up to 10 feet there. So a question that, John, I don't know if you have does anyone have a leader they can show for those that are watching and not listening?
I can make something up real quick if you give me a few minutes. Back to crabbing and fishing, though. What kind of leader setup are you looking for? Are you looking to do a jig or a rig? And if you can, answer that question, and then I could tie something up for you real quick.
To touch on if you're going to use a Tautog jig straight, tie your leader on. I use an Alberto. Mike, you're an FG guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I like it.
I tie my leader directly to my braid, and then regular, knot.
No terminal tackle. Do I ever use?
No terminal.
A lot of times I'll tie my leader real long from the beginning, an FG knot. Sometimes I might make the leader like 8 feet long, just because I just want to keep cutting it down and keeping it fresh where the knot's at, so it doesn't start to fray too much. so I'm not constantly putting a new leader on. Sometimes I'll make it real long.
All right, I can show one right here. John can't get upset because this is one that he actually tied that I still have on a tog rod. Let me see if I can zoom in here for those that are watching. Those that are not, I apologize. So right here, you can see that you got the 2 hooks on there, and they're on, this I believe is 40-pound leader on there. So we've got the 2 hooks rigged up, trying to be very careful that I don't break this rod.
Is that what they would call like, what do they call a snafu rig or something like that?
Yeah, let's get
2 hooks.
Let's get John. John, do you want to talk about this rig?
That is your Belmar rig or your Sweetheart rig, depending on how you tie it. Your best bet grabbing and fishing is to take a look on YouTube about how to tie a Belmar rig, just because it's difficult. It's going to be hard to show on camera and explain on camera. I would go and watch a video on it for sure. But again, I'm using that offshore. I'm not using that inshore. I'm tying a single snelled hook onto my leader inshore. There's no reason to have that double going on while I'm still inshore.
You're going to like embed both those hooks in like a whole crab, basically, right?
What I do is when you're running the, Sweetheart / Belmar rig,
right.
Some people call it a slider rig too.
I've heard them called like a snafu or something like that.
Yes.
Snafu is actually a completely different rig. That basically has a dropper loop in the center. It runs 2 hooks on the outside with it's about 6 inches from that dropper, and it has 2 snelled hooks. That way you can run that the same.
Yeah, so that's what I've tied before then, where you literally like, it's almost like it's just tying like a drop shot loop.
Yeah.
And then you're going to put those 2 hooks onto that drop shot. Right. I got you.
I'm not a big fan of those snafus. Much rather run those Belmars, just because if one of the hooks goes, okay, well, now it's going to go after the other hook, as opposed to, I just feel like it's more forgiving, put it that way, than that snafu.
I want to point out right now that people will have different names for the same thing, right? The same rig tie. So just, and I'm going to recommend this. Go on YouTube. There are some really good knot videos out there, but look it up by those names: the snafu, the Sweetheart, slider.
There's a lot of things you could do. You got to keep playing around too. Like, I don't know if anybody's done it besides me, but last year, me and guy Jacob, man, that kid can fish. And we were out and we were fishing at one of the bridges, and they would not take the jig off the bottom. I don't know what it was. They wouldn't take the jig. It could have been just of anything as simple as like a lot of silt on the bottom, and they couldn't see the jig laying directly on the bottom. But so we put a drop loop on, and I got late. I took the jig off. I got lazy. I had a dropper loop already tied. I put that on, and I didn't feel like reaching in my bag to grab like a 1 ounce, 1 or 2 ounce weight or whatever I wanted to use. And I took a 1 ounce Tautog jig and put that on my surgeon's loop at the bottom, and use the Tautog jig as a weight. And I had a couple times that I got doubles on that, but I started getting them on the jig and I started getting them on the drop loop. It just gives you ideas. Just play around. You know what I mean? There's no right way or wrong way. There's always more than one way to skin a cat, and you can always find a new way to do it. You know what I mean?
I love the lazy fishing. I do stuff like that all the time.
Dude, we discover things that way. Like, I mean, it was cool. You got a jig, and it worked. It worked great, man. Like, it got them biting on the jig. It got them interested in the jig. But I had that dropper loop sitting there, and they were chewing on it on both of them, man.
Yeah, may as well use it. Use it.
So one thing I'm going to say back to that comment where you're talking about there, Mike. Sometimes you notice that jig bite is off, especially in shore, and it could be anywhere. What I'll do is if I'm jigging, and I hate doing it, but what I'm tying up right now is I'll take a jig and I'll run a trailer hook off that jig. Right through the eyelet. You run a nice 10-foot leader off of that eyelet with a snelled hook on the back of that. Then you'll notice, and then you just put a hook on the back of that, and you're good to go. And there's the jig there. There's your trailer hook. That'll cause that bait to float up a little bit higher than sitting on that bottom. That draws them in sometimes.
That's the Rhode Island record.
Yeah, getting it up off the bottom.
Yeah, I hate it, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Hey, if it's catching me fish, I don't hate any of it.
All right. Is there anything that we have missed, guys? Anything that we should cover for those that are getting ready to go out? Or is this, I'm feeling like it's just, guys, we've already talked about it before. We've gone through some of the details, but the most important thing is just to get out there and start fishing the heavy structure from day one. I think the bait was an interesting thing. You know, people talking about the softer baits, the clam, the sandworms. I've never used sandworms specifically for Tautog. Maybe I'll give that a go.
Like John said, shrimp is a very overlooked bait for up here. It's everybody uses it in the South. Everything in the world eats shrimp. I've caught a lot of triggerfish on shrimp. I've caught Tautog on shrimp in the summertime, and then sea bass like it, blowfish like it. Seems like anything will eat it.
Mike, you got to agree with me on this, though. It has to be peeled and cooked, though. I don't know what it is. It's got to be.
I don't know. See, I've gotten it on raw shrimp, and dude, I've always said
it with Tautog for some reason.
Sometimes in the summertime, you can catch those big grass shrimp that are full of eggs, and there's no way you take that and drop that thing won't get bit. A big old fat grass shrimp or a big brown shrimp that we have, they're native here. We have them here. That's what I use for perch all the time is the grass shrimp, but there's no way they wouldn't bite that. There's no way.
But you gotta think this is Fat Dad fishing. So as long as they're peeled and cooked and we have cocktail sauce, we can also have a snack while we're fishing.
I'm all right with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just say, I know that we're all going to get out. So why don't we find a day when we have multiples of us out together?
I'll bring cocktail shrimp and raw shrimp.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I'll bring the raw. I'll bring the raw. John, you can bring the cooks. Mike, you bring the cocktail sauce.
Listen, I'm going to the dollar store like Elle said. I'm just gonna go get some dollar store stuff.
Shrimp ramen.
Rehydrated shrimp.
Real quick before we break off, there are two things we did not talk about. And that is the actual leader material, monofilament or fluorocarbon. And then we didn't talk about hooks either. That might be one thing we may want to just touch real quick before we head out a couple minutes.
Sure. Go ahead.
As far as your leader, Andy's pink. I don't know why. The pink dissipates quicker than the clear. Fluorocarbon, yeah, it's a little more abrasion resistant, but we're talking about fishing wrecks here. So you're going to be retying constantly and wasting a ton of money. So if you're going to do monofilament, I prefer the Andy's pink. And when it comes to hooks, don't go cheap. I've been using Gamakatsu. A lot of people have been yelling at me about it. One person had a stern talking to me about it, but we're not going to say his name. I actually picked up the Tsunami Saltex octopus hooks and the 4-aught. I'm going to give those a shot this year. Yeah, I was told not to use them anymore.
Gamakatsu?
Yeah.
I have a whole box of the octopus Gamakatsus. I got like 1,000 of them.
Yeah, so I'm open to trying different things. I don't know who told you not to use them. I'll tell you they work. Doesn't mean they're the best, but they definitely work, which is the reason that I have packs
What
of
is
them.
it you don't like? Do you not like the octopus, the overall bend in the way the octopus hook is shaped, or do you not like particularly the Gamakatsu?
I don't have a problem with them necessarily, but everyone that I talk to, they're like, I have had so many Gamakatsu hooks break on me, and they're like, wait till the day you have the big fish on and that hook just
really.
And I'm waiting for it, and they're absolutely right.
And I can understand that because they are a forged hook. So forged metal is going to be more brittle. It's going to be stronger, but it's not going to bend. It's going to break.
It'll snap. I got you.
Whereas, like, that's why we made the switch with the Tautog jigs. They're going to bend and not break like a forged hook.
Like the black nickel will, that hook will do, right?
Right.
And
a lot of the mustads are a forged hook. So for fluke and striper, it's not a big deal. But when you're basically setting the hook into a stack of bricks, you want something that's not going to snap.
Yeah, and I think Qua's one of those guys. He's probably one that can agree with. I think he's probably one of the guys that fishes owners. And if you're fishing the owner's hooks, do not use the needle point because the needle point is shaved down, and that's what's going to snap. So, me, I'm not a big owners guy. I've had problems with owners. So I'm going to try the Tsunami Saltex and see what they're about. I picked a couple packs of them up, and they look absolutely amazing.
I'll say Tsunami's a budget brand, but they put out some good stuff for the money you pay. You definitely get some decent gear.
I will say this: their hooks are not cheap. it was $7 a pack for 7 hooks. So it's on the steeper side, but these hooks are flawless. I don't see any imperfection in them.
To the point, I have a whole bunch of them. I mean, I just held one pack up that just was randomly sitting behind me. I don't use hooks for Tog. I mean, I showed you the rig that I had, and I told you John tied it because John got annoyed that I was using that I wouldn't use a rig, and he tied his hooks onto my rod. So
I'm a jig guy.
I love the jigs. That day, actually, it was the boat that we were on. It was crazy because the jig guys, there could only be a few fish in the jigs because they were crossing over everybody from front to back.
See, now that at that point you have to put the jigs away. You can't.
Right. And that's what we did. And John just grabbed the rod that I was using and tied a rig on it. So that's why it's still on there. But I typically don't fish rigs unless I absolutely have to. But then again, I'm mostly an inshore guy, kayak guy. So I never have to use a rig on that. It's always jigs for me.
I like fish. I do like fishing rigs sometimes. I definitely do. Especially for other things like triggerfish and stuff like that. I prefer not to use a jig for triggerfish. I don't know why. I like a smaller hook. Number one. Number two, I like to keep it higher up off the bottom.
Yeah.
Which will kind of tell you something about fishing for triggerfish if you're targeting them. You know what I mean? So I like something that allows me to keep it a little bit higher up. If it's jigs, I like the hooks that are on those jaw breakers. But I guess if I'm going to buy hooks, I like owners. Owner hooks have always, I guess, worked well for me. Never really tried. I don't know. The Gamakatsus, I've used them. I never had any bad experience with them. I know Gamakatsu makes a bait holder circle hook, which is pretty cool. You don't see. I know Eagle Claw makes one as well. Gamakatsu's got one, so that's kind of cool. But never really had anything negative happen to it. But owner hooks are awesome, man. They're great hooks. They're expensive though. They're not cheap.
Extremely expensive.
They are not cheap, but like Ed was saying about Tsunami, a budget brand. I'm about that budget brands. So something's a little bit cheaper and it works. I want that,
I'm right there with you. I spent enough money for the kayak and the gas to get down there now. It's funny. We went down on Friday and I spent well over $100 just to go out and pedal around for a few hours. It was worth it. It was fun to get on the water and see these guys, but I hear you. All right. So anything else that we've missed?
No, I think we pretty much covered the basics.
Yeah, I agree. John's quiet because he did bring up those last 2 points and he did talk about them. I'm going to just throw the quick plug for Andy's. It is the cheapest stuff. It is mono. Mono has in different tests shown to be more resilient up against hard structure and sharp structure than fluoro. I don't care if you get mad at me or not. I'm just saying, look up the research, look up through Salt Strong. They've done a lot of very scientific tests on it, and they have shown that mono leaders are actually more abrasion resistant than fluoro. However, fluoro is going to fade into the water better than mono is. It's got a much, I forget what they call the factor, but it just disappears a lot easier into the water than any mono, including the pink. So just keep that in mind. It's a balance. I try out both. I personally use Andy. I don't have one freaking complaint from that thing. I also have the Seaguar, what is it, the Blue Label or the Seaguar, whatever it's called, the really expensive fluoro. It's like $25 for a spool of it. I don't like it. But I've tried both. Try the Andes mono if you want to go with the mono and see how it goes. In worst case scenario, you're out $3.
I could be misled. Somebody on here, maybe Quaz on here, he might know. Is there a difference that I was told that monofilament has more of a tendency to float versus where fluorocarbon has more of a tendency to sink? Which, if you're fishing vertical and there's water resistance going on in current, that's going to make a big difference. That's that abrasion a little bit, but my understanding was fluorocarbon is easier to keep down. I could be wrong. I could be misled. I don't know for sure. Maybe somebody could comment on that. Qua might know. I see he's on here.
Yeah, I think the one thing to keep in mind is a mono at, let's say, a 20-pound mono leader versus a 20-pound fluoro is much thicker, and it's going to catch that current a lot more than a fluoro. So to that point, you make a good point.
Here he is. Fluoro sinks and mono floats. That was what my understanding of what I was told was.
It doesn't technically float.
That's why, it doesn't float. It's easier to keep down. That's like I had always said, like if I'm fishing a leader for anything, obviously like if it's freshwater, hollow body frogs and stuff, it's straight braid. But if I'm throwing like spooks and stuff like that along and any kind of walking bait kind of surface, I always tie on a monofilament leader.
Yeah.
It might just be my crazy thing of this is how I do it and this is what I'm going to do. Might make no difference, but that was just something I was always told about fluorocarbon versus monofilament.
I think one point to bring up, and we talked about this past week, was sometimes it doesn't matter what the truth is. What matters is how you feel about it. Right. So
100%.
So everybody should have their confidence gear. They should have their confidence lure.
What they use.
Yeah, and if you're confident with it, you're going to fish it that much better. So in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter if it's mono or fluoro. It doesn't matter if it's a bait caster. It doesn't matter if it's a 32 or 33 rod. It doesn't matter if it's an accurate or a pen. What matters is that you're fishing it confidently. You're out there knowing that you're going to catch the fish, not just hoping that you might luck into a fish, and that can sometimes make all the difference. So there you have it. Big thanks to Ed and John and Mike for coming on and going through the preparations that we all need to go through to get ready for the opening of spring Blackfish. And it's coming up quick. So hopefully everybody can get out there and get on the water and put some of these tips and tactics into play and get on some nice fish. Before I go, one more quick appeal to you. Please, if you're not already following or subscribed to this podcast, that would be greatly appreciated. And of course, a positive review on any of the platforms that you listen to this is also greatly appreciated and will help us grow as a podcast. So until next week with the next episode, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.